Today's guest is Matt von Boecklin, who for over a decade has traveled the world as a program evaluation specialist and chemical engineer, living in Asia, Africa, and South America. Along the way, he picked up a few bad habits and has quit his addictions to cigarettes, alcohol, tramadol, and kratom. He works full time at QuitKit, which helps people suffering from addiction to kratom and opioids by offering a non-prescription way to relieve the severity of withdrawal symptoms. So, Matt, thank you very much for being on. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks so much. What a lovely intro. It's like, no, I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so
Yeah, yeah,
much.
very poignant, very elaborative, like right to the point
It
of
really describes me well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm glad that it does. So, you know what? Listen, if the intro left anything out, I'd love for you to fill us in a little bit more on like, who you are, why you do what you do. I know it's kind of alluded to it, but we'd just like to get like a little bit deeper into your story. So, floor is yours for that.
Sure. Well, when it comes to Quit Kid, I feel like the focus on my story is always about how I got addicted to X, Y, and Z and how I got out. But there's more than that. I grew up in Seattle in the 90s and early 2000s, and when I was doing that, man, I was really creative type. I went away from being a football guy into theater. Like that's the kind of kid I started to be, right? And that carried forward in my whole adult life. I play guitar. I like to write. I like to explore the world and experience all sorts of different cultures and put myself out of my comfort zone, which segue is one of the main reasons I'm excited to be here today is because I've never been coached live before, and I think this is going to be a really cool opportunity.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you for that segue because it does actually make my job easier. So I know that before we kind of went live, you went through the audit process for this, basically going through an assessment that allows you to see how your stress is essentially costing you as far as like profit and time leaks and how all the stress internally that we feel translates into like actual consequences within our business. So I have your assessment here. But just before we get into the specifics of that, what was your experience like going through that? Any aha moments? Like what popped up for you going through that experience?
Well, mainly for anybody who's listening, he wrote an excellent assessment, Josco here. It was eye-opening because these are things that one by one, when they come up in your life, you say, "Oh yeah, I do have a problem with that." And then when you see the full list and you realize that you've checked off so many of the boxes that this might be a potential stressor, or maybe this is something that's costing me time, energy, and money in the end because it's a business. And you see it all lined up, it's like, oh, okay, I got some work to do.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad that that resonated with you because that is part of this process, which is making that subjective experience real, right? Like as entrepreneurs will oftentimes go very easily into, okay, I got to solve the business problems that are in front of me, which definitely needs doing. And oftentimes, the reason that the business problems exist is because of root reasons internally of like basically
Mm,
we are the input into the business and sometimes perpetuating the problems, which is why oftentimes when like strategy that's like right on paper isn't working, or there is a general like plateau, or something is just kind of in that hamster wheel mode, usually points to leadership in some sort of way, right? And it's not a judgment call, it's just kind of everything moves from the leadership down. So I'm glad that all that's landing for you. So anything else you want to add to that, or are you cool to go right into the specifics?
sure, I'll just say that starting a business when you haven't had any apprenticeship is a bit like being handed a child or a life or a pet of some kind or anything and being like, develop this. And you think, how? So you can either start pursuing really good habits or you can start pursuing really bad habits. And chances are the decisions therein will be based on your past experiences and the kind of character that you have. And that, again, for better or worse, this could make or break a business.
Correct. I always say it's like i- people that like want to do like real personal development. I'm like, okay, start a business, have a child, or get into a conscious relationships. Like generally those three outside of like, war, something extreme like that, are
Yeah.
going to definitely put you in like close contact with that development. So yes, couldn't agree more. Um, okay, are you good if we kind of dive more specifics?
Let's do it.
Okay, perfect. So I know that when I looked over your assessment, kind of like where the big pieces that needed attention, so there's like seven dimensions that I kind of look at as far as these entrepreneurial stress drivers. Um, I know previously you said kind of interpersonal and team was
Mm.
definitely one, with a
Mm.
lot of like the people pleasing type patterns that were there. But currently, because of where your business is at, it seems like the self-talk, the fear, the emotional overload dimensions kind of hit you the hardest when you're going through the assessment. So tell me a little bit more about those particular instances.
Yeah, let me take a look at this. So there's I got a lot of these out of however many there were for anyone who wants to know what's on the assessment. I think I scored the majority of the things you could have clicked for impacts you in a certain way. But business, look, if you don't have sales, you don't have a business. And my mom brought me up to be very polite and not make waves and always make sure everybody else is comfortable. And I see that a lot when it comes to, you have to interrupt somebody to convince them that you have a value that they need. And in order to do that, you can't just not make waves. Like you literally have to make waves. So coming to terms with that it's a bit difficult, man. It's like undoing prior programming, like behavioral programming from when I was a kid.
So great awareness that this is something that's coming from your past, because usually when people come to see me, it's like my past is now sabotaging my present, and because of that sabotage, I can't actually move forward.
Hmm.
So what you just mentioned with regards to I was brought up not to make waves, I was brought to be polite. All of that is under this umbrella of like people pleasing, where essentially we are consistently looking at the outside world and how do I adjust myself so that the outside world, namely outside people, are in some way, shape, or form okay. Okay, and that
Hmm.
leads to a lot of these instances where we essentially say, yes when we internally mean no, right? So don't make waves means don't do the thing that I'm uncomfortable with, right? Even though that might actually be, especially as a kid, like your authentic expression. Be polite oftentimes translates into, well, I got to suppress whatever my needs are in order to
Hmm.
quote unquote keep the peace.
Hmm.
Now, this has its time and place when you are growing up, that is true, but oftentimes it absolutely wreaks havoc if you are doing sales, right? Because there's a subconscious party that's optimizing for essentially being liked as opposed to being effective around whatever it is that's needed in the situation to drive the sale forward or create a solution for the person in front of you or confront something that maybe isn't that pleasant for them to look at. Or if you're leading a team, I mean the amount of things that fall through the cracks that get unaddressed because these the same type of pattern will also fear confrontation or not be assertive enough, then it's like you're literally paying out of pocket for lapses in performance, which then you're also likely compensating for by making out for that work, etc. So
Hmm.
anyway, I know I'm kind of talking a lot at you just because I'm kind of illustrating the general ways that these can sort of manifest with business owners, but just out of curiosity, what lands for you with those, what doesn't?
A lot of that. How about that? A lot of that. It's all about overcoming what makes you uncomfortable when you're in a business. Because unless you're in a business for the wrong reasons, you do have something that can be of help to somebody. And it is fair to ask them to give you remuneration for that value. The problem is, I have this voice that says that's going to make them uncomfortable. When in reality, what I really think it means is that's going to make you uncomfortable. And so then I project that into a potential customer by, any conversation will be shepherding them through in a manner of comfort. And I mean, that's not a problem. It's just like, that's not the, that's not the way I want to rest on it. I want to be more dynamic when I talk to my potential customers so that I can meet their needs the way that they need to be met.
So when you say I want to be more dynamic, how do you define that?
Let's see. No one would ever mistake me for a good salesman right now over the phone. I'm too afraid to say what I really mean. I'm too afraid to introduce the fact that, yes, I'm here to learn from you and learn about your business, but I'm also here to pitch my product. And I have no idea exactly when to make that switch from, learning about what they need to showing what I can offer without sounding like a salesman. And just like that word, man, reminds me of telemarketers blowing up the phone and me and my mom being like, stop calling. We don't want what you have. And it's ingrained, you know?
So there's basically a lot of associations around negative associations around sales and what it means to sell.
And if you don't have sales, you don't have a business. So how unfortunate is that for me?
That's pretty unfortunate. Yeah. I do like jokes aside, yes, it is unfortunate and I'm glad you're having like a light time of it, but it is obviously critical and I know you know that. So you're also quite self-aware. Like you point out like, well, I have this voice in my head that sounds a lot like my mom. And I know that it's my mom's voice and I'm aware that it's holding me back. Right. So your problem isn't awareness. And I told you even this kind of before we went live. So my question to you is, given the level of awareness you do have and probably the time you've spent thinking about this,
Mm.
why do you think it's hard for you to overcome these particular things?
Lack of experience.
Okay, lack of experience in what?
Lack of experience pushing that boundary. I've always been working with an organization and never had my own to the point where I was asking people for money.
Okay. So now that you're in that situation and it's kind of, do or die for lack of a better term,
Mm.
why is that not enough of an incentive to just put in those uncomfortable reps?
Oh, I mean, I am, but I don't know if I'm doing it the right way. I mean, I'm making sales, and Quick Kit has been a resounding success, but I just feel like I'm holding myself back from, let's say it's at 10%, and it could easily be at 40% within the next 3 months. I think that's just all on me and the way that I approach growth, business
Okay.
growth.
So I'm doing the reps that I feel like I need to be doing. I'm getting uncomfortable. And then there's this focus on, I don't know if I'm doing it right. And
Hmm.
similarly, while I'm having a lot of success, this business has been successful so far, but I know it could be more.
Yes.
So, and I'm just kind of poking and prodding here out of curiosity, right? Because there's one part
Mhm.
that's like, well, it's a resounding success and it's moving forward. And then there's another part that's like, well, I'm underperforming. So kind
Yes.
of which is it in terms of that push pull that's happening right now?
The product has had remarkable word of mouth success, and I've been very fortunate for that. It works, plain and simple. The Quit Kit is meant to help relieve withdrawal symptoms when you're going through you're quitting an opioid or kratom addiction, right? And it has worked resoundingly well, which has given me a lot of leeway to focus on other things than sales and polishing the product, polishing the customer facing the website and systems. But now I'm at a point where I need to grow to institutional partnerships with detox facilities, sober living facilities, and things like that. And I don't know how to get on the phone and just say, hey, my name is Matt. I have a product you've never heard of. I know you run things very strictly at your facilities, but would you mind taking a look at this thing that I made? Wrap your head around that. That's a hard phone call to make.
Sounded pretty simple when you just made it right.
Yes, my man.
Like it makes sense. It's, under 15 seconds. Sounds like a pretty good cold call.
Really? Oh, see? Yeah, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. So going back to kind of the original question then, basically like you're in this good spot where, or let's just say comfortable spot where the product is effective, it delivers on its promise, and it seems like it's been doing a lot of the hard work for you in terms like the product sells better than you do in some
That's
ways.
better. That's a good way to put it.
Okay, fair enough. So obviously that's a good thing, and that should be celebrated. That's not an easy feat to accomplish. And what I would just reflect back to you is, given the bio that I read from you, kind of like your
Mm.
engineering background, etc., your comments about, okay, well, I was always in a different company and I was kind of doing the behind the scenes stuff. It's like the product doing well is basically excellence in the background stuff, meaning it's not actually ever forward facing. So I can excel at the thing that I'm naturally gifted at, which is using my head to, solve problems and do things at a high standard. That's reflected in the fact that your product is doing better sales than you.
Mm.
But that's like a natural consequence of your gift, and that should be celebrated. Okay.
Mm.
That same gift, when applied to the front-facing part of the business, is going to be your biggest detriment.
Mm.
Because if you looked at your assessment, a lot of your assessment is around, like the things you scored high on were around basically fear and the self-talk, mainly the negative direction, and the subsequent emotional overload of that, right? Those are the three main categories you scored high at. If you look at all of those things, they are fueled by a smart brain not knowing what to do with all of the emotions that spring up internally. So, what's a smart brain going to do? Well, it's going to loop a whole host of thoughts that are essentially friction to the goals that you want. So, before I even go on, like what lands for you with that, what doesn't, like where you at with that reflection?
Well, first of all, it's really nice to hear somebody be honest. A lot of times I don't know, we sugarcoat things, but it feels good to hear honesty because honesty reflects what's actually going on in my head, which is that it could be better. And I should be clear, I'm not bad. There's no bad here. It's just I want to be at the top of my game, and I want to get there in the shortest amount of time possible. So, as you said, a host of thoughts come in, and the brain says, "What about this? What about this? What about this? What about this?" Ever since I started the business, what I've really been looking for, and it's my engineering brain, says, "I want a roadmap. I'm here. I need to get there. Put systems in place." As you said, get your reps in, but do it smart. Don't go down the wrong paths. You can watch 1,000 YouTube videos from people, but you're never really going to know which one works for you because you're different than them. So yeah, a lot of that resonates with me, man.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. And this is the trickiest thing with smart individuals. Again, and this is what I mean by this is whenever I have clients that come in, what I say, like really strong neck up, meaning like exactly what you said. Like I'm really good at understanding the process. I see all of the pieces. I understand, sequentially what needs to happen. I can analyze things. Like I can use my brain very effectively, and I have a history of evidence that shows me that that is true. I can solve those types of problems. When it comes to the things that you are talking about right now, right? I'm essentially holding myself back from selling. I hear this voice in my head that I know isn't mine, and it's holding me back from doing something so simple, like a literally a 15-minute or 15-second pitch that I just made, right off the cuff, because there was no stakes in just you
Yeah,
telling that
yeah.
to me, right? Your brain is going to default to doing what it does best, which is solving problems. The problem is your brain right now doesn't speak the language that is needed in order to solve the problem that's in front of you, which is actually an emotional problem. Because the same part of you that it can like have good awareness around exactly, what's the voice, what's going on, I can see my behavior and how that happens, that's everything neck up.
Hmm.
These subconscious patterns and the fears that drive them are all neck down, meaning they speak a different language that generally doesn't make a lot of logical sense. Like there is no logical sense that you can't say that 15-second pitch for, whatever, 10, 15 cold calls a day. Yet, I know that when you sit down to do that, there's going to be this well of emotion and subsequent like flurry of thoughts that put a lot of friction in that process. And to some degree, you can will your way through that. It's just kind of like that gets exhausting and it's kind of has diminishing returns over time,
Hmm.
right? But it's like to solve that, I need a different tool. And the
Okay,
tool
I
that
like
got
it.
me success so far is not the emotional toolkit that I need. Okay. Put it in simplest terms, your IQ is up here and your EQ is down here. And when you can
Emotional
match
cue.
those two, that's where you get like
Let's
your
go.
pattern of people, like when that matches, you compound very, very quickly. It's just kind
That's
of
what I
getting you
want,
over that
man.
hump first.
That's my goal. Look, dude, I'm not selling anybody any bottle of snake oil, and I know that because it worked for me and it's worked for 150 people plus. It's like at this point, I got to get out of my own way. That's really what it comes down to. The technology we have, you can build anything for almost free these days, and then scale it before you pay. Like, I just gotta get my EQ up to my IQ, like you say.
Okay. So if we kind of zoom out a little bit then,
Hmm.
what is like when you say I get out of my way, what's the vision beyond that? So like I'm out of my own way, what am I able to
Zero
do?
friction.
Okay. So get even more specific. What does that actually mean for you?
Okay, so let's say at the beginning of the week, I take 3 hours and I say, by the end of the week, I will have done X, Y, and Z. This requires reps. This requires touch points. This requires X amount of money sold. This means that in order to get there, I have to do what it takes. But in order to do what it takes, there's that, I guess we could call it the EQ, that'll come in and not speak the language I mean, it's easy for me to say we need these goals, and these quotas. That's my IQ. And then the EQ comes in and says, whoa, whoa, whoa. Hey, man, maybe that's not the right way. Well, maybe that's not the right wording. Well, maybe that's not the right format. Maybe you need to talk to somebody else. Maybe you should actually read the book. Well, did you see the documentary? And it's like, shut up. This is useful for rumination, but it's not useful for execution.
Okay. So you've identified basically the pattern you don't like and that gets in your way right now, which is essentially overthinking. Because every
Mm,
like rumination is just extreme overthinking. Overthinking in a small sense is just, questioning every detail about what it is that I do. And then that's kind of with overthinking, I call it, it's like the molasses of momentum. Like it
that's a
just
good way to
slows
put it.
momentum
It slows it all
down.
down.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I understand that's the pattern you don't want. So if you lost the ability to engage in that pattern, what would be there? Like who would you be? How would you operate? What would that look like day to day?
That's a good question. I suppose the answer that everyone would usually give is they'd be somehow unstoppable. But what would matter most to me if that got out of the way was immediately connecting with whoever I spoke to. Because I'm really good at that when I'm comfortable. But, above all, connect, like James Joyce said. Once a connection's formed, I can speak very eloquently and comfortably about my product. But until that connection's formed, I feel like I'm just pushing product on people.
So basically, one of the kind of friction points here is that your subconscious believes you need a permission slip to pitch authentically.
Yeah, man, that sounds about right.
Yeah. Because comfort is basically another way, like if I comfort in this instance where it says like I'm comfortable with the person so that I can pitch freely. Basically, that is saying there's a part of you that requires safety, and safety is granted by permission to be myself, to express what it is I actually want to say without having to filter and screen. Generally, that's some sort of permission slip required. Meaning,
Yeah,
and I'm
right.
guessing here, like if I gave you a stage, I said like, look, these are all people suffering with your problem, go and like speak, I think you'd have a pretty easy time. But if I said, here's a group of people that may or may not need your product to go speak to them, it would be a much different experience. Like, is that accurate as far as that
Yeah,
interpretation?
I mean, I would guess that for most new entrepreneurs, they feel similarly though. Warm versus cold. It's a much different mind game.
Correct. And listen, that's also a good point. Like, I don't want to take away from the fact that like there is a natural toughness to this whole thing. Like
Mm,
it's not like nobody stumbles up a mountain. You know what I mean? Like there is effort and there is like stuff that's required to climb that mountain, which you are very well aware of.
mm,
What I'm getting at is to climb that mountain with a 50-pound pack and pebbles in your shoes and, stuffed up with like so much heat when it's like sunny outside. Like that is unnecessary stress that isn't making the climb any easier.
mm,
But
mm.
these types of things where like my subconscious requires permission, there are these voices in my head telling me that I am, too annoying. It's like molasses moving forward. Like that's the 50-pound pack that you are trying to climb this mountain with.
Yeah, I
So,
see
like, does
you.
that make sense?
I see you.
Okay, perfect. So, anything else that's connecting for you with this, or kind of it all makes sense?
It's nice to hear.
Which part specifically?
Well, look, I mean, this is all stuff that I think about periodically in different, you could call it episodes, but put it all together, and it's interesting that we talked about my mom right away, and that I'm looking for permission to interrupt people when I obviously was denied that growing up. You know, they always say it's about your mom. Oh, sorry about that. That's my cat's food.
Okay,
Sorry about that. But yeah, that's gonna be it's gonna be interesting to talk about.
perfect. So, I know this is kind of ironic because it happened in real time. So, I didn't even hear your cat. I had no idea that actually just happened.
You didn't hear the bowl filling?
No,
Oh, thank God, because he's probably gonna start yelling. I closed the door and kept him out.
that's okay. So, basically, what I'm getting at here is like, look how quickly you went into apologizing about something that in reality wasn't actually an issue,
Hmm. Interesting. Oh,
right?
uh-oh. You're excavating my soul right here.
Well, you said you wanted an escape out of your comfort zone, so
Yeah,
here
man,
you
let's
go.
do it. Let's
Okay,
do it.
and I don't mean that in any like judgmental way. It's like, oh, look, I'm pointing out like here's like poking and prodding. It's just being trigger happy to apologize and say sorry and all. Like obviously there's a time and place where that is very much a beautiful thing. But being so apologetic that you're basically not even taking inventory of the reality of the situation. Because it could have equally been like, hey, I don't know if you heard that or not, but my cat just made X, Y, Z. Oh, you did? Okay, cool. Like let's move on, right? Like that could have been equally the thing to happen. All I'm really just trying to do and illustrate with that is the tricky thing about these patterns is sometimes they're so subconscious that we might not even recognize them until somebody points them out,
Hmm.
right? So again, what lands for you even with that?
There are times in my life where I'm feeling so confident in myself that I notice I don't do that kind of behavior. And if it's something like that happens, it's not like I'm gonna just brush it off and be inconsiderate, but I'll approach it differently, as if it hasn't phased me, but I will mention it if it needs to be mentioned and not take responsibility for it, you know, and put it that way.
Correct, right? And that is a big people pleasing thing where we'll just assume that like we are somehow contributing to it, right? Like if the other person feels bad, I take the responsibility that they feel bad. When the reality is actually their feelings are their feelings and it has nothing to do with me. I don't want to maliciously like destroy somebody's feelings, sure, right? That's a totally different conversation. But it's just like allowing the other person to have their experience. And this includes the pitching. Like,
Hmm,
okay, they're uncomfortable hearing whatever, I don't know, like
interesting.
the price, the volume, like whatever it is that you're pitching, like that's on them. That's actually not on me, right? So what lands for you with that?
That just sounds like good business.
It does, and it also allows you to be effective in terms of what the situation objectively calls for versus bringing your own distortions into the scenario,
Hmm,
and then it becomes about something else. So, for example, when I have clients that, and I mentioned this before with regards to like team members, let's just say a team member is not pulling their weight in some sort of way and they're afraid
hmm,
of confrontation. if they're going into those meetings trying to optimize to keep the peace or to be liked, then really what they're optimizing for has nothing to do with what the situation objectively calls for, which is, what was the gap in performance? How do we fix it and make sure this doesn't happen next time? Because that is a direct profit leak because I have to sign this person's check, yet the performance is subpar, right? And that kind
Mm.
of has other ripple consequences, right? So in a sales context, it basically means I'm going to dim my own light to ensure that the other person feels okay or I'm liked versus what is actually really effective for them, the clients that I serve, the people that they can help with this, et cetera, et cetera. Like it takes away from that particular mission. So again, what lands for you with all of that?
Let's see. Well, pick something and ask me because that was kind of a lot.
Okay. That's okay. So just whatever like is relevant for you is relevant for you. Like this is not a test where like, I need all the answers. So just and if it's nothing, it's also cool because we can go down that road as well.
Nah, I mean I I see I see very much overlap in what you said.
Okay, perfect. So if we're kind of going back to the original premise of all of this, right? I was asking, okay, so if you lost this ability to, overthink everything, like what's left over? Okay, so I wouldn't overthink, I wouldn't ruminate. Well, one of the things is I would be able to connect with other people by
Hmm.
essentially giving myself my own permission slip. I wouldn't need the other person to validate me first. Okay. What else is available to you beyond these limiting patterns?
Well, let's see. There is there's also the idea of why. And my case is unique because my product isn't an electronic, it isn't a food, it's not a subscription service. It's something that will help you quit an addiction. It turns your life around from, polar opposites. So turning that into a business has been a little bit strange. The last thing you want to do is give anybody, false hope. Fortunately, Quit Kit works. There's a money back guarantee in case someone orders it and it doesn't live up to expectations. But if you were a businessman and you had a product that worked as well as mine, you'd probably sell it for twice as much as I'm selling it now. In
Hmm.
fact, that is the feedback that I've consistently gotten is why are you selling this so cheaply? And talk about giving yourself permission, man. I designed the price so that it could trade 1 day's worth of kratom use for a lifetime free of it. When in reality, a lifetime free of kratom use is hundreds and maybe $1 million by the time you die. So $55 pales in comparison to even a week's worth of spend on an addictive drug. And yet, I hear people saying you should put the price up. It's like, yeah, maybe when I start selling more. All right, maybe when I have consistent traffic through meta advertising and it's selling like, every day through that kind of ad spend, I'll be like, all right, we'll jack it up. Now it's super viral. But I know that that's not actually a gate that I need to pass. It's already valuable. There, no amount of traffic is going to increase the value of the intrinsic value of the product. And I know that, and my users know that. My clients, rather. Users is a tenuous term in this context.
Hmm.
So it's like, from a business perspective, do I charge more? And I ask my clients who are already going through hell to pay more money because it's a good business move, or do I keep it low as some sort of mercy because they're going through hell? Even though that's my call. That's not their words. Those are my words. That's my own association instead of them. How about that?
Okay. So what are you afraid of there?
I'm afraid that someone would say, even once, I can't believe you would ask me for that much money when you know that I'm in so much pain.
Right. So the prospect of that hypothetical is worth more than the fact that people are already saying you should charge more.
Uh, yeah. Yeah, you have a way of putting things.
Okay. So what lands with that reflection?
Well, it's just amazing the way that we put up these barriers in our head and then we're afraid to let go of them. It's
Hmm.
this fear of loss. It's one of the
So
primary drivers
same
of human
question again, then
behavior.
what are you afraid of?
Uh, my business goes kaput and I lose my good reputation.
Well, I don't think that's what you're afraid of when it comes to raising the price.
Tell me.
Or, I mean, I could be wrong. It just that I don't see the connection, I guess, from what you've told me. Like if I raise the price, my business goes kaput. Is that
Yeah, yeah,
accurate
as
for your
in
experience? Okay, okay,
somehow someone would say, or everyone would say, well, now that it's that expensive, I'll never buy it. This is just another guy coming to rip us off,
okay.
and then I'd have no reputation and no product.
So in other words, I am ignoring the uncommon feedback, which is you should charge more. Like that doesn't usually happen, right? Like it's positively uncommon. I'm ignoring that because subconsciously I'm optimizing on some version of being liked. Because you mentioned reputation multiple times,
Yeah,
right? And my brain will catastrophize that to the extreme of like, not I'm not gonna be liked, I'm gonna be so hated that my business is gonna go under.
yeah, it'll fail. Right.
Correct. So going back to these patterns cause us to optimize for being liked versus being effective. What do you think you're doing here?
Hmm. I think it's pretty clear. I'm just trying to picture it from somebody else's perspective. If I saw a product like this and I thought, okay, $55. Yeah, I'd probably think it was lowballing the price.
Okay. So logically, like when you can just kind of isolate your own logic, you're like, yes, doesn't make any sense. People are saying, like your actual like evangelists, because I'm like it takes a lot for people to even just tell you, hey, I like your product. They tell you, hey, I like your product, you charge more. That's a totally different level of like being a fan of what you do. And what you do is more than just being a fan. Like it's like a legitimate, in some ways, life-saving or at least life-changing thing.
Hmm.
But I'm going to ignore all of that because subconsciously, that inner child that's so rooted in being liked, not making waves, being as polite as possible, is essentially freaked the fuck out and doesn't have a spot in an adult situation of like running a business. It shouldn't actually be there. Yet that's how these things work. They pop up in areas that actually shouldn't. So what lands for you there?
I mean, we can all analogize this. Let's keep the childhood metaphor going to when we were learning to swim. Until you learn how to tread water or be in the water without sinking, it terrifies you. The second you go in and you at least know somewhat what you're doing and you realize you're not going to die, it becomes a lot of fun. And a lot of business growing the Quick Kid has been the same thing. Because even though I'm talking about these problems today, I have overcome a lot of self-doubt on the way to just getting here. Otherwise, this business would never have existed. But I think this is just another version of that. We circle these problems like kids afraid of not knowing how to swim. But then once you dive in, you're like, this is not bad. And this is not so bad, you know. This is probably another iteration of that kind of metaphor.
Yes, fundamentally, I do agree with you. And the thing with metaphors like that is it's like if you think of swimming, swimming is a fairly like it's a fairly finite thing. Like I do this thing and then I realize it's not going to kill me. And then for the most part, every single other swimming occurrence looks very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Business is a much more infinite game.
Mm.
Like you have multiple instances of something that looks similar in completely different contexts with completely different demands that can reoccur at different levels. So, for example, the same patterns of politeness and not making waves are going to show up in team They're going to show up in delegation. They're going to show up in sales. They're going to show up with customer complaints on like how far I go to like satisfy them, even if they're unreasonable. They're going to show up in pricing. So in one ways, yes, you are correct. In another way, it's like, okay, then like I have to kind of solve each problem one by one, or you solve the root, which is like, why is this younger part of me who's still rooted in the past so freaked out about what's going on? And if I can reconcile and heal that part of me, then it kind of just allows my adult self to operate in all of those situations
Hmm.
as you would to the best of your ability.
Hell
So,
yeah.
what lands with that?
Well, I think you just narrated exactly what needs to change. Well, more than that. Not what needs to, it's not like something needs to change. It's more like you just have to accept that these are limitations and you will work on them and that you won't die. Like you're not gonna die and you convince yourself you're gonna get hurt in all these ways that someone else convinced you you'd probably get hurt. Going back to my mom's amazing, by the way. I will clarify right now. She's a sweetheart. She had a tough time and she still managed to raise me. Uh, But you get littered with all these negative self-talk patterns as you grow up and you absorb other people's perspectives. And since they're adults, they're the gods. They're the ones that make the world work. And you just try to get their attention and affection and get what you need so you can survive. And you absorb their input like it's gospel, right? And I know that, someone who's dealt with addiction, a lot of that relates to who you were as a kid. Um, Carrying that forward into business. Business is this wonderful playing field where everybody can get a chance if they have a product that they can make valuable, and you sell it. Dude, you can change your life. You can change your personhood. You can change your character. You can change your entire trajectory. So I'm hoping that business will be this arena for me, not only to build an impactful product, distribution network, whatever, but also a more impactful Matt von Becklin who was able to go through this world and create more value for himself.
I mean, it's already doing that. I don't think you have to like hope for it. It's clearly already pushing you towards that. And this whole conversation today is really not about like, I gotta like I haven't overcome anything, so therefore I gotta fix all these things in order to move forward. It's about taking it from good to great, right? And
Mm.
identifying the exact patterns that are the identity and leadership friction points that stop you from operating within your greatness. Because when you operate within your greatness, that ripples out to whatever operational upgrades you need in order to basically do what you just said, which is like make this amazing business that actually essentially funds this life that I want to live and who I am while I make it, right? Even just as a simple example, I was asking about, okay, so if all this overthinking patterns were eliminated, what's one thing that I would do? Okay, well, I would sell with more boldness and confidence. I'd likely increase the price of my product to be more reflective of the value. It's like if you change nothing all year and you sold the exact same amount for a proper higher rate, you'd right away increase your profit by
Mm.
ever much. Like literally, like you could change nothing. You could be happier because you're less stressed out. You have higher margins, and all you did was make a objective decision based off of like real world feedback that was not distorted by all of this internal drama that's basically sabotaging your decision to do that. Right. And that's just a simple example of what you've told me right now. So how does all of that land for you?
Yeah, it's good, man. I wish we had been talking about this stuff back in September when I was building this out by hand.
Well, people come to see me when they come to see me. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, but there's that
the
phrase
timing's
when
right.
the student is ready, the teacher presents himself.
Correct. Correct. So, I mean, I think at least for me, this is pretty clear with regards to like, you know, what I think you stand to gain from eliminating these patterns. Um, do you have any more questions or things that are still left outstanding that I can help you with?
Yeah, let's take a look. We dived into problematic habits. pretty hard.
Hmm.
But when it comes to control, I feel like this is a pretty common thing. It's not about getting other people to run with their own ideas. It's more like, how do you just simply accept the fact that you don't know everything, and let alone even if you did, you have nowhere near enough time to complete it all yourself. And that's pretty hard to deal with from like when I was a student, group projects, stuff like that. I'd be like, I could have done that better. I would never say that, but I'd be like, that's terrible. Like I could have nailed that. So when it comes to building out this team that's probably going to be coming in within the next 3 months, get a salesperson, get a marketing person as this grows, it's like, what advice would you have for handing off your baby to other people and hoping they don't drop it?
Hmm. So actually, I was going to backtrack a little bit. In that example used with the group projects, why would you not say, I could have done this better?
There's, I don't stand to gain anything from hurting somebody's feelings. Uh, sensitive kids can be. It's like you say something and they'll take it personally rather than, no, you just did a shit job on the project. It's like maybe this isn't your subject, right?
Hmm.
But now it's going to impact my grade because you didn't do a good job.
Okay. So I'm willing to take a loss in order to preserve somebody's feelings. Is that accurate for you?
That is accurate in that
Okay.
situation, yes.
Okay. Perfect. Does that translate to how you view control in this delegation scenario you told me about or no?
No, man. I mean, I see where you're going, but I've actually had trouble the other way. I tend to be a very good manager, very, very, um, how do you say, effective at letting people excel in their skill set. But I've also found that the impossibly high standard I hold myself to can trickle down to others, and they don't need that. They don't need me to set that standard that I set for myself for them because I'm not meeting it. And it's like, how can I expect them to meet it when I'm not meeting it? And yet, sometimes that'll come out and I'll see that that hurts them, and then they won't produce. That's it. Like emotions do translate to production. There's no way around it. You have to foster a flourishing community. Otherwise, you're tanking yourself.
Hmm.
So it goes between, as you said, sparing someone's feelings, holding them up to the standard I hold myself up to, which I'd be a little bit more mentally healthy if I didn't do that. The in between, the sweet spot, the Goldilocks, that kind of thing. That's what I'm scared of messing up in the future.
Okay. So a standard that nobody can meet ends up just being a waypoint of judgment. Because like if it's impossible to meet and we're all judging ourselves against the horizon, we're always losing.
Hmm,
So what you end up with is this perpetual gap that is crushing to you and to everyone around you.
hmm,
So to answer the question specifically around, okay, I should say X, Y, Z would be doing you a disservice because you're starting from basically a judgmental frame point.
hmm,
Okay, so this is the essence of perfectionism that is kind of shame-based,
hmm.
meaning I have to meet this impossible standard. Everything has to be so polished and perfect that no blemishes can ever occur.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And you know no one else is going to be able to do that. You know it.
Well,
You
not
know
only
it.
everyone else, it's like you're saying I can't even meet it.
Right. Like myself, just regardless, but they would
Right.
never be able to.
So it's kind of like like to ask your team to do anything that you are not willing to do yourself. I'm not talking about able to, like somebody has a different skill set. I'm talking about willing,
Hmm,
right? It is losing from the start, and it's losing from the start because you're actually just acquiescing something that has to do with essentially your own internal drama.
interesting.
So if
Interesting.
you want to talk about like profit and time leaks that occur, like this could literally paint all of the systems inside of your business as far as whatever fulfillment and delivery and customer service and whatever else you might set the standards for, right? And I know this trap well because my first business imploded because of this. But when you
Hmm.
start to use your business as a proxy for your own self-worth,
Hmm.
that is a hole that you're never going to fill objectively because you're
Hmm.
playing the wrong game.
Hmm.
That's an internal game. So what's landing with all of that?
It's exciting, man. I mean, this is kind of what I was hoping for when I started, and I wanted a system. I wanted a roadmap. I wanted to say, okay, this is my set of things that are weak, need to be challenged and addressed. These are my strengths. Run with these, work on these, so that we don't fall into the very predictable, as clearly as you have interpreted my words, very predictable traps that you can fall into.
Correct. So unlike the, business roadmap, this work is about the identity and leadership roadmap that's going to make the business roadmap go smoothly,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? It's like you have the perfect vehicle, but if who you are and how you lead that vehicle is distorted, then you're going to misuse and crash the perfect vehicle, which is why, despite really good things on paper, a lot of business owners either, some version of crash or delay or however they sabotage the business happens because the identity and the leadership pieces distort everything, right? And you saw exactly how that played out in my brain asked a very intelligent question. I have this scenario with my team. I know that there's a solution for it. What's the blueprint?
Hmm.
Head up, everything you asked is an absolutely right question, right? But it's built off of a faulty foundation. And this is what I'm talking about different languages,
Hmm.
right? Because your actual answer to the smoothest solution, because look at it this way, even if you were to change nothing in your current systems, other than be at peace with the fact that you nor anyone else is ever going to be perfect and that is actually okay, suddenly makes everything better. Because you said it yourself, the emotions impact the implementation.
Hmm.
How would your people and how would you operate if you had more peace of mind to just execute what's in front of you to the best of your ability? Right?
Yeah, well, it's a game changer. Fear of loss, it stifles creativity, it stifles motivation, and we cling tightly to what we think is valuable, even when we're clinging to a sinking ship.
Correct. And impossible standards are basically a nicely painted bow to all of that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right? If I can't meet a particular standard, like if I'm always aiming for the standard I can never meet, it's effectively the same side of the coin of like I can never lose, or I never want to lose, right? So it's all kind of overlapping around the
Yeah,
same.
sure is. This is cool.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad that it's landing for you. So, any other questions, as far as all those pieces are concerned?
No, I mean, I'm pretty straight on that.
Okay, perfect. So I know like eliminating actually all of these patterns, I guess beyond the scope of, this particular episode or whatever. Like I wish I could do it in one conversation, but that's not how these things work. As far as what you are clear on in terms of like what's in front of you, quote unquote, what game you need to play, what you stand to gain, like is all of that clear for you, or is there still something left outstanding?
Well, I think we unpacked the boxes, but we didn't repack them. So there's still work to do, right? You shine a light on something, you identify it, but then it's like, all right, now what?
Correct. Well, now you do the healing work to actually eliminate these patterns. But like I said, I wish I could do that on these episodes, but unfortunately, that's a bit beyond the scope of doing that in this context. Um, but in terms of like at least the clarity of the awareness, like does this feel complete for you?
Ah. I feel like you just therapized me. I feel like I'm about to walk out of a therapy session and my head's just gonna be like, all right, well, what are we gonna do about all that?
Yep. That's exactly what I do. So that's about accurate. Correct. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I wish I could solve all of that in one session. I can't. But if it does feel complete for you, we can kind of move this episode into a close. Is that
Yeah,
okay
yeah, I
with you?
got you.
Okay, perfect. So, thank you very much for showing up in this way because I know it's not comfortable. Okay, so I just want to acknowledge your courage and vulnerability to do this. Okay. Um, and then two, just to close off, floor is yours. Let everybody know where to find you, who's the best person to find you. Like I said, floor is yours for that.
Okay, well, you're welcome and thank you. So, if you're interested in learning more about Quit Kit, you know someone that's struggling with addiction, or you are struggling with addiction, I highly encourage you to check it out. It's at www.tryquitkit.com. That's TRYQUITKIT, tryquitkit.com. And if you want to get in touch with me, Quit Kit or no, you just want to ask a question, uh, reach out. I'd love to hear from you. It's Matt, MATT, at tryquitkit.com.
Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you very much for being on. And for everybody else listening, we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.